So great, now we're going to talk about cost advantage in a value chain. And just as a reminder, we can look at a firm as a value chain. In other words, a series of value-added activities that are linked together by a common network. So I've already drawn out matrix-style organizations before, but you can also look at a firm as, it produces value-added product A, value-added product or process B, and value-added product process C, and value-added product or process D. And you, in some ways, are kind of ignoring the CEO and all that kind of stuff at the top because they are seen to provide the linking mechanism between these value-added products and processes. So think of this for a second. You got a car manufacturer producing tires, doors, windows, and assembly. Those are all kind of distinct activities that are linked together by an overarching firm or organization. So that's kind of a value chain. And so every value creation activity or task has a specific cost structure. The cost structure for making tires is very different than windshields, doors, or putting the stuff all together, right? And then the reasons for that, of course, could be indirect and direct costs, material costs, procurement costs, the personnel costs, maybe tire makers cost less than manufacturers, for example. And so the overall cost advantage or disadvantage of any given firm is the sum of the activities of the cost advantages or disadvantages. Meaning, you may have a firm that is the best tire maker in the world, but they stink with windshields, doors, and putting it together. And in fact, they stink so bad in these last activities that they are actually behind all their competitors. So you need to understand cost advantage holistically as a sum of all the parts of the value chain. Okay? And on the flip side, you could say this firm is the worst at producing tires, but they're so good at windshields, doors, and putting it together that they actually have a cost advantage. What you need to look at is the total cost of the final product or service. So if you wanted to actually do a value chain analysis on a firm, you'd of course disaggregate the firm into separate activities, much like what we've done here. And you would establish the importance of the different activities in the total cost, right? So let's say you were terrible at making tires, but let's face it, tire making is not really what determines the cost of the vehicle. It's, it's engines. You might want to focus on reducing costs of engine production before you would producing of tires, right? Of course, you compare the costs of all the activities, and you could look at, well, how much does it cost to our manufacturers to make an engine? How much does it cost for our competitors to make a tire, etc.? And so you try to figure out what the best practice is in the industry, and then you try to replicate it. You'd identify cost drivers. Well, why does it cost us so much money to make engines? I mean, you would break down this process even further. And I go into a lot more detail in this in my Lean Six Sigma modules if you're actually interested. But you look at the steps in the process and try to identify which were the least cost-effective steps. Okay. You'd also want to look at linkages between the activities both in terms of production, as I've shown here, but then also things like after-sales costs, things like marketing, things like quality control. And so you get all that data aggregated together and you focus on which areas you'd like to reduce the cost of the most. So it turns out, I don't know, yeah, we're the worst in tire making in the world, but that doesn't cost a whole lot with regards to the total cost of the vehicle. But what is really killing us is step one of engine production is extremely expensive. So we need to focus all of our efforts on here. And that could be because we've got bad equipment, our workers aren't doing what they're supposed to do, or we could also focus on step 4 of the engine, and that's a product, and that's a component of the engine that's somewhat defective, so we keep having to replace it through warranties and everything else. That's really what's costing us so much money. That would be a reason that you should look at it. Now I'll give an example. Think of Barilla, the pasta maker, right? They are one of the leaders in making pasta, and they do it because of cost advantage with respect to their competitors. First of all, they are the leaders in purchasing raw material and equipment. So they have a tremendous buying power. They set the price, not their competitors. And because they buy so much raw material, okay, they're able to also translate that into production competitive advantage. So their cost of production is very low. They have a tremendous amount of manufacturing know-how, and they also have great process innovation. They have the biggest, most automated pasta plant in the world. And because there's so many people there, there's a huge amount of cumulative experience, so they have a great learning curve. Their logistics, again, because they buy so much, they have loads of inventory in their warehouses, so that if there's ever any sort of a problem with supplies, no problem, they can keep working. They have, again, because they're the pasta leader, they're able to set the price that retailers will charge for those pasta products. Advertising, again, a huge economy of scale. Everybody knows Barilla. Their R&D, of course, has a global reach and a global scale, again, benefiting from huge economies of scale. So I hope you've enjoyed this module. We will continue this particular course with a discussion of differentiation advantage, and I hope you will join me then. I'm looking forward to seeing you.